What's the honest reaction you get when you tell people what you do? Is it one of genuine interest and intrigue and them wanting to know more, wanting to know how you can help them, or maybe passing your information immediately over to someone they know because you think that you are the perfect person to help, their friend or colleague? Or is it one of disinterest or trying to get out or move on to the next subject as quickly as possible because they don't understand it or they're just not interested? If you're anything like me, unfortunately, it can be the latter. But after today's podcast, I'm confident that I can change that. I've been given the most amazing tips and tricks on what in effect was a live coaching call with an amazing storytelling coach. We dug into the strategy and system and frameworks that he uses to help small business owners to transform the way they talk about their business, to make it something compelling, something that people actually want to know more about, and to explain to people on an authentic and genuine level, not just what you do, but more importantly, why you do it, to compel them to want to know more and to work with you. So the question is this: how do entrepreneurs like us, who don't have an endless supply of cash, how do we leverage the best apps, virtual assistants, automation tools, and systems to scale our businesses, increase our profits, and have more time to do what we love to do each day? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. My name's Dr. Steve Day, and this is Systemize Your Success. Welcome back to Systemize Your Success. I'm Dr. Steve Day, and today I'm joined by Stephen Steers. Stephen is the author of Superpower Storytelling and the creator of Context Selling. He's got nearly a decade of experience in helping founders of professional services firms tell the stories that get their customers excited to buy from them. And with that intro, I'm excited to speak to you today, Stephen. So welcome to the show.
Great to be here with you, Dr. Steve. Thank you for having me.
So, Stephen, I want to know, how did you get to what you do today? There's always a story behind, and I'm interested, especially with someone like you who talks a lot about telling the story behind the business and behind the sale. Like, tell me your story. Brief for as long as you feel is appropriate, but why is it you do what you do? How is it you help people? And why this above anything else in the world you could have done?
Yeah, I love the question, and thank you very much for it. I'd say the first piece is, they say one of the reasons you build a company or do things is to be the help you didn't have. And that is very, very much my case. So when I started professionally in sales, I'd sold ice pops and bought things from garage sales and fixed them. And as you say, fettled on them maybe in the UK, and then I would sell them on or whatever. I've been doing that since I was very young, but I became a formalized seller a bit over a decade ago. And the company I was working at offered no training, no guidance. It was just literally first day was, here's a list, get us meetings. That was it. That was all the training I got. And I clawed my way through and eventually got a little bit better at things. And then a few years in, after I gotten promoted and got my feet under me, I get called into the office with HR, and you know what's going to happen. And I was let go. I had my best quarter and I was let go. And as I was leaving the meeting, I saw one of the founders of the company. I went to shake his hand and he completely blew me off. And so I went up to my desk. I got all my stuff. I said bye to everybody else in the company who I was friendly with. And I walked outside to pick up the pieces. And I got fired on a Monday. And the best part about getting fired on a Monday is you have the whole rest of the week to be sad about it. And so I'm walking down, this is in New York City when I was living there. I'm walking down in Soho towards the train to go back to my house because I didn't know what else to do because it's 11 in the morning at this point. And I get a ping on my phone from that founder and to my personal email. And he says something to the effect of, oh, I'm really sorry I blew you off. I'd spilled coffee on myself, so I wasn't present before. So I'm sorry about that. But anyway, I wanted to let you know that you got the short end of the stick here a lot with regard to territory, vertical, and management. Too little, too late for sure, but I hope you had a great experience here nonetheless. And I think you'll be a great seller should you choose to continue in that capacity. So that email was a weird one to get for many reasons because I had a hard time at the company. But wow, what a crazy situation. You as the founder know that one of your people working for you is having a hard time and not with adequate resourcing, and you chose to do nothing about it. So why I do what I do is not only to be the help that I didn't have, but to shed that mindset from founders. If you're going to hire people, yes, they're going to help your company grow, but you're also working with someone who's bringing you their life, their context, and building a career for that person. And you should take that very seriously. So why I do what I do is that, and I'd say we're going to cover this a little bit more when we get to stories, but why you do what you do is your mission. It's not what your company does. And I think for, especially for small businesses where there's a lot of competition and we all know somebody else who does what we do, you being able to articulate what made you make the choice to do what it is you're doing is going to help you differentiate yourself in the market and potentially draw great talent towards you because they have that same why.
I love that. Brilliant, brilliant start to the podcast. And you didn't disappoint me. I had hoped your story was going to be compelling, and it was. No, really great.
Appreciate it.
And I love your storytelling ability as well, because I think as I was listening, I was actually picking up on the details that you were telling me and the time of day it was and the day that and all these sorts of things. I was thinking this is a story that I'm actually quite interested in listening to. It's like I'm reading a book for someone's well, it's like an audible book, you know. So yeah, anyway, brilliant. And a couple of things that I just wanted to really pick up on from like personal reflections on that and your story, and whether it's for a sales team or any employee, like what you just said about giving your team the support they need to grow, or you use different words, but you know, about giving them understanding that it's they're giving their a huge proportion of their life to be, you know, in under your
Leadership.
leadership. Yeah, exactly. And so an example of this happened recently within one of an old client of mine, and when they reflected back, saying, "Oh, I've lost another member of staff," and this is there's been multiple staff members that have been lost, and it's just sometimes people fail to see that actually why like that there is a recurring theme here, and there's only one thing that's consistent in this situation, and that we need to sometimes just dig deep. And I know I've been there. I've been a terrible manager in the past. I'll hold my hands up. I have been like the angry manager. I've been over demanding manager. I've been lazy manager. Like all of these things. But then that gives you, like I say, why do you do what you do? Is because actually once you figure out there's a better way of doing it, and for me, it's about actually leaning into systems to have a process behind these things I do because I'm naturally not great at them. Some of these things. So yeah. Anyway, just reflections on what you were saying, and to rolling on from that. Then, so you've spoken very much about the why behind what we do, and
Yeah.
it's almost a cliche phrase now. So I want to hear why it actually does matter. And you know, I think it was his Stephen Sinek talks about the why, and he's got
Simon Sinek.
yeah,
Hmm.
and
Start with why.
Simon Sinek, sorry, and not another
Hmm.
Stephen, unfortunately. Um, and
He's
so
not on our team.
it's almost and there's books on it and all the rest of it,
Sure.
and so, but I believe you that it is massively important. But why does it matter to anybody else? And how can we as business owners talk about it in a way that doesn't sound like, well, it's all about me and what I do? You know, how do you make it sound authentic and compelling?
Yeah, great question. And I think everyone's going to have a slightly different answer for that. But I'd say, why is it important? There's a couple different levels to this. First and foremost, like for example, for me, it's I've been up since about 5:30 this morning to go and conquer my demons and get after what I'm working on. My why gets me up in the morning, regardless of how much sleep I've had, because I know I have things I need to go do. So from a small business owner, if you have a business, you know how hard it can be some days where it's not going the way you want or there's something broken inside of it. That why is what keeps you pushing even through those really difficult days because you have something that's bigger that you want to accomplish. The second side of it is if you have a team, if you're fortunate enough to have a team, it helps keep your team positioned, efficient, and optimized. For example, a story is a guiding principle that we all agree on. So one of the quotes I like is, "Will this help the boat go faster?" So as an example, if you're working with a team member and they're trying to come to you for management, and again, we all are learning. Management is a skill that is continually learned. You don't ever have it down, right? You're every person is slightly different, and you want to figure out how to move people forward. But one of the best things I think managers can do is if we do have this thesis, this story of the company, if someone's like, "Oh, is this the right move to make? Should I be doing this or should I not be doing this?" You can first say, "Hey, is what you're thinking about doing helping this boat go faster?" And you can allow for that person to reason through it and then say, "Hey, tell me about how it is or how it's not." And again, you're training yourself as a manager, but you're starting to create space to ask questions and include people in the decision making that you want and have them feel empowered by your leadership through the questions you ask. And a story can be the thesis and the guiding principle to do that. So that's one piece. And the other piece on this is it's not used by most founders. Everybody else, for any listeners here, I bet you when you somebody's like, "Oh, so what do you do?" They tell you what the company does. They don't tell you why the company does it. And why is that important, especially in a sales context? 95% of purchasing decisions take place in the subconscious, which means people are in an emotional state when they make a decision. If you want a decision made, whether that's to somebody to work with you, somebody to cut you a big check, to have maybe your child go to bed at the time that you want them to go to bed at, having that specific piece ready and available for somebody to understand and to take in helps them get to a place where they can make a decision on it. So a story, a why, an example of what made you say, hey, you know what, I'm going to do this instead of going to be in medicine and study surgery like you have. Like I chose to do something else. That's interesting, compelling, and differentiated. And in a crowded marketplace, you can be the one that stands out with something just as simple as telling people why you decided to make the decision to do what you're doing now.
Yeah,
It's a business card.
it is, and it's so interesting. Like, and I say this out loud because I'm sure I'm not the only person listening or who is listening to this that may feel the same thing. Is like I'm hearing you say this, and it makes perfect sense. And I know that when I do webinars and things, I talk about my why. Like it's part of you've defined it very succinctly. It's like actually I left medicine because I wanted a different life and I wanted to emigrate and have time and these things. And these are the compelling reasons why I did it and why I chose to actually help other people to do this. And but I don't ever think I've given that as the answer when someone says, "What do you do?" Because when I start telling people what I actually do, they glaze over and "Oh, that's great. Yeah, going well. Great. Let's move on."
Systems.
And
Nice.
and
Yeah.
and and it's like, and it's so obvious because actually what I do is in some context quite boring. I'm a systems guy. Like, it's either complicated or boring, like one of the two. Or the very few geeks in the world will go, "Wow, really? Tell me more about that." But that's very, very few. And so, yeah, having a different answer to that question
So
of
let's
what do
ask
you
you
do?
here, what made you say, you know what, no more medicine? Because that's a really serious commitment. And then I want to do systems. What made you say that?
The systems came later as a solution to the fact that I felt I'd given up my highest value of freedom by in effect giving myself to someone else's agenda, someone else's playbook, and I couldn't choose where I lived, when I worked, when I took my holidays, and didn't want that for me and my family. So I
Okay,
decided to.
that right there is what do you do? Have you ever felt like you're giving yourself to an agenda that's not yours? You don't have the freedom to live a life of purpose that you want or be in the places that you want? I had the exact same thing. I was a doctor. I was my life was set out in front of me. Every place I would go, what time I would show up for a shift, who I would be doing surgery on, and I decided that wasn't the thing for me, and I had to create a system in order to be able to get out of that. And once I figured out how to do that for myself, it became a very clear mission for me. I want to help other entrepreneurs do the same. Now we're not just talking about putting a spreadsheet out and putting things into places. We're getting that emotional input for someone like yourself who's not making the story about himself, by the way, because you're saying, have you ever?
Yeah.
So we got them thinking about themselves, and then we gave our own personal example of where we are and the emotional state we were in when we made a big decision to change everything. Then we talked about how we've made that decision and some of the things we've gotten out of that decision, and then what we're doing to help other people in a similar emotional space make another decision. So that feels different. There you go. That's
I,
a quick example. Feel free to take
yeah,
that
yeah,
wherever
yeah.
you want.
For anyone, if anyone's not watching the video, I'm just sort of like literally contemplating what I'm gonna. It's not that I've shut up and not don't want to speak. It's like I've the reason I'm hesitating what to say is because I'm super impressed with what you just done because I've told the story many times. I've worked with presenting coaches in the past and I've been through this process many times and I've told my version of why I do what I do to many different people and no one has ever come back so quickly with a I think brilliant compelling, in effect, sales letter to be able to, or to communicate the why behind what I do in a way that, as you say, it actually compels people to, or makes people understand that the reason I do what I do actually is genuine, that I actually care about the thing that I do because it had a huge effect on me and my life, and decided that actually there's something I can change positive in the world. Other than just getting rich is what many people start a business thinking they want. And actually that doesn't drag people to any business I've ever started to try to get rich is failed,
Failed, of course.
and I
Yeah.
think this is the reason why. So anyway, I just wanted to say, yeah, that was very impressive. So
I'm here for it, man. And the other thing
yeah,
I'll say is when again, feel free to use that or update that however you want, but I think you get the effectiveness of it because it's your own story. I put it right back in front of you, and you're sitting there like, oh, I feel that. That makes sense to me.
yeah,
That's what a small business needs to be able to do every time that they get the chance because people are so inundated with all this information where the emotional inputs are not involved. And so if you can help somebody get into an emotional state of some kind, again, like we don't want to be manipulative here. It's a very real thing that you're talking about, right? I
yeah, yeah.
switched my entire life over from a sure career to being an entrepreneur. That's interesting. That, in effect, right? Why is that a great story? Besides, it's a great story. If I'm thinking about that, I can trust your process and you're somebody who's like me. So I'm more likely to listen to you, to come back to hear what else you have to say, and maybe tell other people about you. That becomes the business card. And so I think, and we're going to cover more on this as well, if any small business owner, anybody listening here, really sit down and think about that for yourself. That's why I'll choose you over somebody else. That's the
Okay.
difference maker.
Let's get into that a little bit more. So maybe we talked about one type of story, but I'm sure there are other types of stories that people can talk about. Maybe they can't resonate with the one we've just shared now, or I've just shared
Mm-hmm.
now. So, how do you help people that sat there thinking, I just don't know which story to tell? I don't know. You know what? Actually, when I
Yeah,
first did presenter training way back 7 years ago or something, we had this moment on stage where you had this, you've got to tell this story. And that was actually the hardest thing. And I actually changed like back then to like what I thought was my story then to what I've just talked about now, a mile worlds apart.
I bet.
I chose one about when my father died because it was a really emotional time for me, and I was a bit of a mess at the time when I did this.
My condolences.
But that's not the thing. And like so, I think this is a really important thing. And I think that when people listen to this, it's so easy to talk about it, but actually doing it is the tough stuff. So how do you help people at
How
that
do we
point?
do it? How do you
Yeah.
do it right now? Okay, let's get tactical.
All right.
The first bit of advice I give anybody who's thinking about storytelling first is you don't have to be Steve Jobs here. You don't have to be David Sedaris. You just have to be the you that you are, right? Who you are is the most interesting thing about what you do and is the least utilized part of your business. So let's start with that. How do we get there to what stories? I recommend every single listener here get a Google Doc or a Word document, whatever your preferred word processing software is, and create a document called Story Bank. Throw any story you think of from your life that you think is interesting, compelling, or fun. If you have memes and stuff you see on social media, things that you like that kind of have some type of lesson to you, throw them in a document and have them waiting for you. You don't have to sort them through yet. After we have that, there's 4 questions that you should ask before you tell any story. So they're the following. The first is what's at stake for the audience. So again, if you're going on stage, that might be a slightly different thing because you're going from one to many. But as an example, like if we're talking about, I use the example a lot of AI. So every single business owner is wondering, is AI going to help my business? Is AI going to destroy business because people are going to be out of jobs? Nobody knows, but everyone's paying attention. And that's something that's going to get people to look up and pay some attention to what you're talking about. So let's go for that example. What's at stake? The second question is, what does the audience want to learn or achieve about that thing that's at stake? So AI is the big thing that we're concerned about. As a business owner, how can I leverage AI to make sure I stay ahead of my competition? Very simple example. The third question is, what do you want the person to feel? So this is where we get back to the emotions, right? 95% of purchasing decisions take place in the subconscious. The last 5% is the logic, is the numbers, is all that other stuff. But I've made an emotional decision first before I decided to say, hey, yep, you know what? I'm going to write that check. Example of how you want someone to feel, you would say something like, business owners who don't leverage AI will be out of business in 6 months. I mean, that may be hyperbole, but you're getting people's back up like, oh my goodness, learn how to take care of this. And then the final thing is the fourth question is, what do you want people to do next? Now that they know what's at stake, now that you know what they want to learn or achieve, now that you know how you want them to feel, what are you asking them to do with this information? So you could tell any story you want, but if you run it through that framework, you're making the story about that person. So, Dr. Steve, do you know why you tell a story? Pop quiz.
To get them engaged in what you're talking about.
Yes, and so again, no trick questions here. The reason you tell a story is to
Yeah.
better help your audience tell their own.
Okay.
So if you take that altruistic sense of it, it's like I'm a vessel and a vehicle for you to better understand yourself. And so, for example, you see when we just kind of did that very fast session with your story, we started with, have you ever been? So now we're talking to you. And then I give you an example about me and my life and how that relates to what you want to learn or achieve. And then I'm telling you about how you should be feeling about it. And I didn't give us a call to action for your story there, but we kind of worked through portions of the framework to make the story that we're telling about ourselves in reference to the people. And so if you run through those four questions, there's three specific stories that, or types of stories that work very, very well that you already have that you can run through these questions and use. The first is your mission. So we kind of covered this. It's not what your company does, it's why your company does what it does. I think if you've been listening this far, you've heard the difference between how Dr. Steve describes what he does, and then when we added that emotionally charged actual story about what made him make the transition. So, mission. The next is your vision. So, what does it look like when your mission is complete? For you, might be I want to work with 10,000 business owners to help them streamline their business to build the life that they want for their family and their future. Maybe that's the example. And the key thing here about visions, and especially in relation to outsourcing and systems, Dr. Steve, is this helps create guiding principles for the people who work with you and helps them be drawn towards you. Because a big mission draws big crowds and has people like, I want to help with that. So the clearer you are about the big picture of what you're shooting for, now we can get people to be like, yeah, I want to do that versus go over here. And they get to meet you in a different way in context of how you and what you're doing is going to be beneficial to the life that they want to lead as well, right? We talked about building and training your people and having that be a cohesive journey. The third story type is milestones. So we kind of bounced in and out of that with your example here, but milestones are things that you've been through, difficulties, how you've surmounted really challenging times. And you can use this in a couple of different ways. This could be you as the founder. You could also reference this as people you've helped and served. So you could say, hey, I worked with this big shot lawyer who was completely burnt out, drinking alcohol every single day of the week to cope with the stressful hours. And he didn't know what to do and how to build a system to get himself out of it. So after we begrudgingly got him on a call, we talked him through some of the ways that he could be thinking about this and then created a plan. And together, over many difficult meetings, within 6 months, he was out of his law career and started to build himself his own practice where he could spend time with his new daughter. And he was able to take his first vacation in 7 years. And it seems like he's on a good run right now. Again, that's just a quick example. But you could share milestones of yourself and from people you've worked with. And now we've created parity and given more stories for people who are potentially the new audience we want to bring in to find some resonance. That's the key. So those are the three stories to review. It's mission, vision, and milestones. And the four questions you should ask before you decide what story to tell are: what is at stake for the audience? What does the audience want to learn or achieve about what's at stake? How do you want the audience to feel? And then what are you asking them to do next? And whichever story you choose and whichever way you run it, if you run it through those questions, it's always going to resonate with the people that you're planning on because you've sat down and thought about it. So the story has a purpose. It's not just telling a story.
Fantastic. My mind's racing ahead as it often does. Um, and I'm almost saying that one of the things that I'm least proud of in my business. I love the work I do and the results my clients get, but my front end, like web page, for example, the vision statement, which I know you've quoted, which is on, or my mission statement, which is on my somewhere on my website. Those aren't things that have had huge amounts of thought coming into them, and they are literally primed for a revamp. And one of the things that, like, what I'm hearing here is, like, there is these three main stories that we can talk about, and actually, if we present those, you can, I'm just spinning with this with you, see if this is actually something that is practical or does this get confusing. Is like, I can just imagine those three ways of stories. I'm telling why I do what I do. I'm giving a contextual, maybe some examples of the transformations of the clients, and then I talk about my vision. I mean, that's really exactly the information that is on my website right now, like, but it's not told in the way that we just talked about.
It's
So
not.
I'm just feeling like literally I'm just seeing that, literally going through and applying the process you've just talked about to really what's already there, but we'll just change, transform it into something far more, well, not just compelling. It's like people actually get what it is that I do, or why I do it
Yeah.
at least, and then the
It's not
next
the
step is
what,
to
it's
find
the
out, yeah,
why.
the why,
Yeah, it's the difference.
and they'll connect with it because of all the things you
Hmm.
just said. I love
The
it.
other thing is, and some won't connect with it, but
Yeah.
they won't be confused by it.
No.
Right. So the other thing is it also just helps people say, oh yeah, I want to walk through this door versus what is that a door?
Yeah.
Right. It's just
Exactly.
kind of those small little tweaks that you can make. And again, you're doing really good work that people really need. It's just how do we translate that into a language, a story that they can say, ah, I've experienced that. I need to talk to Dr. Steve about it.
Yeah. Totally.
Some of the difference.
Just thinking about stories. I mean, the podcast for me is, it's really just that me just documenting. I interview great people as well, like yourself,
I
which is
appreciate that.
fantastic. But actually, the in between bits when I do my own rifting, that is just literally me talking, telling the story. Sometimes it's about challenges, sometimes it's about successes, sometimes it's about ideas or just meetings I've had with clients and experiences. And I'm actually seeing, like, it took a while for it to kick in, but I see clients, and actually someone joined the program this week based on purely the podcast. They'd never seen a landing page. They'd never spoken to a
Wow.
single one of my other clients.
Congratulations.
They've just listened to, and this is now becoming a a recurring thing, and that's like something that I guess dreamed of, but didn't think it was ever going to be. But I can see and understand why. It's like they come to me, and it's the easiest sale in the world because they've listened to the story,
Yep.
to my story that's developed over whatever number of weeks or months they've listened to it. And so they've already got into the mindset and everything. And then it's just a case of, yeah, they just wanted to sort of have a conversation and, what is it you do? But they've already sold it before they got there. And that's exactly what we're talking about here, but just less formalized. So it's
Have you
fantastic.
heard of the 7-4-11 framework?
I have not.
Okay. So this was back in maybe 2020, 2021 when that app Clubhouse was big. And I rolled over half asleep on a Saturday morning and I guess I turned it on by accident. So I landed in some marketing forum and I don't know who said it, otherwise I would cite them. But the 7-4-11 framework is pretty interesting because it says in order to convert someone to a client, you need to spend 7 hours with them across 4 channels and make at least 11 touches. So when I hear about the podcast, that's 7, 8 podcast episodes. They can just kind of binge and listen and get a feel for who you are and how you think about things, the questions you ask, and otherwise. Maybe they're on your email list, maybe they're following you on social media, but you've given yourself a breadth of ways that folks can engage with you and how you can help them tell their own story better. So I love the podcast for that, and I think you're doing great work. So again, flowers to you.
Thank you very much. I For those listening now, I ask my guests sometimes to not sometimes, always to suggest questions which they might like me to ask them, and often they're just weaved in, and I use them as a guidelines, etc. But sometimes guests present a question that I have to just read verbatim, and I have no idea how to weave this in naturally to sound like I came this
Okay.
up on my own. So I'm just going to ask it. So in case you're listening, wondering where the hell did this question came from, it comes directly from Stephen. So
Okay.
here's the question: what do street vendors in Istanbul, what can street vendors in Istanbul teach us about sales and storytelling?
Okay, I love the question because I chose to have it asked to myself. So I want to take a step back here. I've been really blessed to be able to travel all over the place and do some of the work that I do, et cetera. And one of my favorite things to do when I go to a new place is see how people move around and how they sell things. It's fascinating. It's really cool to see what people do, especially street vendors. And so I write about this in my book. This was one of the pivotal moments for me and just, that's genius. So I'll take you back. This is 2020. This is February 2020, before the world changed for everybody. And I was out in Istanbul teaching some workshops at the ITU University. I was working with about 30 different entrepreneurs, taught a series of workshops, had a bunch of one-on-ones. And then after, I would go back and work New York hours because small business owner, I have to do everything. But on one of the rare days I got off where I didn't have a workshop, I decided to go explore. And one of the places I really wanted to explore was the Galata Tower, which, if you look, it's one of the peaks that pierces the skylines of Istanbul. It's very famous. I want to say it was built in the 1200s as a lookout post. And some of the interesting history about it, there was a guy named, last name Chelebi, I believe. That's the Sigilia letter. And he built a pair of wings and jumped off the top of the tower and flew 4 miles, some 200 years before the Wright brothers. So I was like, I'm really curious. I want to see this place. And when you get there, it's such an old place that the streets are tiny. Like you couldn't drive a car, or unless it was a very, very small car. It's very, very thin, windy streets, very hilly. And I get to the bottom of the hill in this area and I start making my way up the hill and I see a guy carrying a shoe shining box and he's walking past me. And as he walks past, literally about a foot or so in front of me, his shoe shining brush clatters to the pavement. And I'm in a rush because I have to go back and work. But I look at it, I look up, I look at it, and he's continued on down his path. And I said, you know what? If I drop something, I'd want somebody to tell me about it. So I turned to him and the little tiny Turkish I know, which is, I think I said merhaba, like hello. And the guy swoops around on a dime and I pointed his brush and he runs over and he's almost in tears and he's like, oh my goodness, I feed my family with the shoe shine. Thank you so much. This has changed my life. Like, you've really helped me. I'll shine your shoes. I'll shine your shoes for free. And I said, no, I don't need it. And I try to walk away from him. He corners me. No, no, I'll shine your shoes. And I said, no, because I was wearing Vans and I don't know why I would want my shoes, my Vans polished. So he's cornering me and I'm working my way to get away from him. And about the third time he tries to press me, 4 stories up at the kitty corner, right above me, some person in English, no less, starts yelling at the guy saying, you always drop your brush and try to scam the tourists. And as he turns around to answer that and get into an argument, I make my hasty escape. And then my sales brain is running all over the place. What an incredible way to generate leads for your business, dropping the brush in front of somebody. So I say that all to say, besides it being a fun story, is a story is one of the best ways you can drop the brush in front of your clientele and have them come towards you and picking it up, bringing it back to you so you can have a conversation. So that's what I say. What can street vendors teach us about? That's one of the examples. There's tons of different things I've seen from street vendors, but that's one of my favorites because it says, he played on the story while manipulative, and I don't love that, but he played on the story I told myself about being a good person so that I would pick it up and bring it back to him. And so the bones of it, I think, are very strong. Think about that for yourself. How do you drop the brush in front of whoever you're working with? Don't manipulate people. But I love that example because it just purely crystallizes how you can get people to come towards you. And if you do it the right way, you can have a lot of people coming towards you to help solve the problems that you solve in only the way you solve them.
As you were speaking, then one thing popped into my mind, and that is like the story that we described before, the why. I can see how that would guide someone or encourage someone, I should say, to ask, well, how do you do that? And that is the ticket. That's the golden response you want. Like when you're in a crowd and you're, in a networking meeting or whatever you want to call it, like, and people say, well, what do you do? And you'd say it. What you really want is that response. And it's exactly that thing. So you're dropping the shoe brush or whatever, the polish brush. Like that's just the comment of why you do what you do. And the next thing is okay, great. How do you do that? And then that's
What
it.
for a fee?
Come,
What for free? How for a fee?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, love it. Absolutely love it. Stephen, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. This has been one of my favorite, if not my favorite podcast I've done. And I've got to be
Man,
careful
thank
when I
you.
say it's my favorite because it might not nice for the people. But I think you've been
Your favorite one
incredibly,
today.
yeah, you've been incredibly generous and creative with the way you've worked on this, where we've done this podcast, and yeah, I love it. Simple as that. I'm speechless, which is very rare for me.
Thank
So
you for having me, Dr. Steve.
I'm going to draw this to a close, but there's a couple of things I want to do before I go. Firstly, please let people know how they can find you and learn more about you if they want to seek your professional guidance or
Well,
otherwise.
thank you for the question. You can find everything you want from me at stevensteers.com/podcast. So super quick on that. I don't think we got into it today, but where to use stories, I think in a sales call is one of the best places and to conquer objections. So for your listeners, I have a call script, a discovery call script that doesn't feel salesy, that makes it feel like a conversation, allows you to leverage stories, and should make it very simple and easy for you to guide people towards the outcome, which is becoming the customers that you want. So you can get that at stevensteers.com/podcast. There's also a bunch of other resources there, like how to plan a presentation, how I wrote a book in 18 months, just doing 25 minutes a day. I have all those resources, even a book template, and a whole host of other things that should help you on your small business journey. And if you have questions, you can get in touch with me there or find me on LinkedIn. I got the big hair.
Fantastic. I'm genuinely going to go and get your call script and check it out, and probably a few other things besides. So fantastic. Before you go, I've got one question, or two actually final questions for you. One is, what are your favorite apps, browser plugins, or technology things that you like that make your life or day more enjoyable or better?
Technology things. My favorite apps, I use one called Dark Reader. It takes all of the white balance out of windows and turns them dark, which saves my eyes many, many miles. I love that one. That's a really simple one. I've been using Asana as of late,
Yep.
and then I'm huge on Pomodoros. So I use the site pomodoroonline.org. I can just lock in and get my work done. Other than
That's
that, I
cool.
do my best to stay away from too many apps, just the basic stuff. And I think good time and focus time is the best way to build a system that works for you.
Yeah, yeah. Fantastic. Cool. Finally, the title of this podcast is Systemize Your Success, but what does success mean to you?
Success means creating the freedom for yourself so you can live out the vision you have. So a system is the star, and that allows me to think bigger and be more creative and spend great time with folks like yourself, Dr. Steve.
Cool. Good answer. I love it. Stephen, thank you so much indeed. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks for having me again. Have a great rest of your day.
Cool. Thanks.